Hey, what's up? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Roll Pod, an Alabama sports podcast from Bama 247. I'm your host, Cody Goodwin. As promised, brought Brett Greenberg back on to kind of tie a bow on what was the early signing period. Alabama's 2025 signing class. Basically, everybody in the fold now officially last Wednesday, but we kind of waited a few days to see if there was some potential flip stuff or if Alabama was going to make a splash anywhere else. More or less done for this early period. We brought Brett back on to kind of polish off what is Alabama's 2025 recruiting class. Brett, I got to ask, have you gotten any rest since last week, or are you still running on fumes?
No, we're kind of recharged, ready to go for this transfer portal, which, I think, a couple departures for Alabama early on. So it's kind of getting rolling early for Alabama fans to follow. So recharge, ready to roll for these next, I guess it's 3 weeks that this portal's open.
Yeah, college football calendar never sleeps. Had the early signing period last week, had the conference championship games over the weekend, had the college football playoff bracket reveal on Sunday. Bad news over the weekend for Alabama. Let's sprinkle in some good news, right? With Alabama's 2025 recruiting class. It finished, or is in line to finish, as the number 2 overall class, only behind Texas, who made a pretty significant push, not just with Justice Terry, but quite a few flips, I think, on signing day, or at least during the early period. So they were able to ascend to number 1, got Alabama at 2, and then Georgia, Oregon, Ohio State in position to finish 3, 4, and 5 behind the Crimson Tide. Alabama had 4 5-star signees, 9 total top 100 signees, and 21 total signees in all. Brett, I wanted to start here. Number 2 ranked signing class, handful of 5-star guys, handful of top 100 recruits, a lot of blue chips in this class. Just off the top, what impressed you the most about what Alabama was able to accomplish in this 2025 recruiting class?
Yeah, I think we kind of talked about it in this preview show, and I got asked about it kind of after signing day as well. It was kind of a otherwise uneventful day for Alabama in terms of the guys you were expecting to sign did so, aside from obviously Jace Clorizio flipping back to Michigan State, 8 days after he flips to Alabama. That we talked about how kind of crazy of a flip that was, pulling him out of East Lansing. Obviously, he decides to stick back at home. It's not too much of a surprise there, but you mentioned Derek Meadows getting that late flip from LSU as well. But otherwise, kind of a normal day, signing day wise for Alabama, kind of not many surprises, which, can be good and bad thing. The good thing is that, like you said, Alabama ends with the number 2 class after the signing period. Maybe you like to add a couple more fireworks at the end, but, you add a guy like Derek Meadows. Overall, this class, again, I keep on saying it addresses a lot of key needs at certain positions. Actually just dropped all of our thoughts. Yourself, myself, Rodak and Alex, kind of just who we think can be kind of early contributors. And I know there's kind of some tough decisions there, kind of narrowed it down to 3. So anything you kind of have a problem with that, it's a good problem to have.
And we discussed this on the kind of the preview pod last week. Just when you look at the class, the offensive players, like you have the quarterback, right, with Keelan Russell, he's kind of the superstar. You have a lot of offensive linemen to set him up and protect him. They were able to pick up the receiver in Derek Meadows. We'll discuss him in a little bit too. Signing day flip from LSU, running back in A.K. Deer, just seems really complete. The defensive side, maybe not as fully complete in terms of just a lot of high level talented guys coming in, but the guys that they do have coming in, especially like in the secondary, we talked a lot about Ivan Taylor, Dijon Lee, Chuck McDonald, guys that could probably see the field right away. 1, because they're talented, and 2, because those position groups maybe a little thin, at least when you're looking at the way too early roster for 2025. So that said, the flip side of this, Brett, where do you think they maybe could have done better when you look at this 2025 class?
Yeah, I think it's kind of, this answer is probably not going to shock anybody. We talked about it on the preview show, and it's been all over our board, kind of defensive line. And, again, that's a position that every program in the country is going after, and it's a hot commodity, and there's straight up just not a lot of them. Andrew Ivins, our director of scouting, talks about that all the time. You've seen kind of the guys going into the portal and shooting up the rankings, guys like Jaheim Otis, who maybe didn't really play a lot or wasn't really too productive in Tuscaloosa, but he's obviously a hot commodity just with his size and, again, with that position. So obviously you add London Simmons, and he's a guy that I think is very underrated, could potentially contribute a couple years down the road. You got two JUCO guys and Steve from Canada as well, our favorite guy, finally making that official. And then Cavante Henry, who they flipped from Mississippi State, who's, maybe this staff likes to think one of Steve and Cavante Henry can maybe contribute right away. But, other than that, I think it's kind of, again, it's offense. You address a lot of positions. You get that flip of Derek Meadows. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Losing Caleb Cunningham, adding Derek Meadows, obviously not a 5-star, but it's not a bad consolation prize there. And then defense, again, Dijon Lee, Ivan Taylor. We were, again, putting that thing up. We had kind of the same thought process with Ivan Taylor and Dijon Lee. It's, that secondary is kind of just stacking talent, and it's who's going to come out, come next fall.
You mentioned the flip. We've kind of talked about it a little bit. Derek Meadows, wide receiver, 4-star receiver, flipped from LSU on signing day. This is one of the big names that you told our board to watch, that we discussed a little bit on the preview show or the primer show to get ready for the early signing period. 6'5", 200 pounds, man, from Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas. Top 50 overall prospect. So there's a lot of talent here. I think the book on him, at least basically what I read from you, is that a little raw, right? He's coming in maybe a little bit more of an athlete than a true receiver. So we'll kind of see what all Jamarcus Shepard can do with him, how he develops overall. Not necessarily a guy that needs to come in and make an impact right away. That might change a little bit when you already look at like some of the Alabama guys that are hitting the transfer portal, right? I think as of the time that we're recording this, 8 Alabama players are planning on entering the portal, which opened today. We're recording on Monday. The show's going to come out on Tuesday. Of the 8, 3 of them are already receivers, right? Caleb Odom, Kendrick Law, Kobe Prentice. So still, I think there's enough overall talent and bodies in that room that you probably don't need Derek Meadows to perform and produce right away. But there's a guy that has a lot of upside. I'm curious, just from your perspective, Brett, what does he bring? And then also, I guess, like, what was the process in terms of flipping this guy from LSU? Because make the strong case that LSU is wide receiver man. Like, they put receivers in the league every single year. How was Alabama able to pry him away from that?
Yeah, I think, real quick to your point of obviously losing 3 transfer portal or guys to the transfer portal at position, we've seen, which we have on our board and our transfer portal tracker, Alabama is actively, in that position room as well. So that's, one of the positions we're going to follow. But, kind of back to Derek Meadows again, 6'5", 200 pounds. I may say that 5 times between the next minute and a half, but like, that's kind of just what jumps out to you right now. And yeah, I know a lot of people on our board and a lot of people, you look at the stats, it's, 2 career 100-yard games. It's back-to-back seasons, I think, of right around 500 receiving yards. The production's not really there, but again, it's a very raw, kind of untapped potential there. He's a track star. He won Nevada track state, Gatorade Player of the Year 2 years ago as a junior. So he's kind of got that breakaway speed with that, again, 6'5", 200-pound frame. And, like Cody said, it's not a guy that, hey, we're going to need you to kind of play immediately. It's a guy that can come in and maybe contribute and, later in the games against, teams that they're kind of up in scores and can kind of improve his route tree. But this was a guy that we were following even in the summer. He came and took an official visit among several others. I think Georgia got one, LSU, Notre Dame. So this is a guy that was kind of going all over the place, taking his official visits. Alabama was right there in the end before he committed to LSU. Communication really never kind of stopped between them. Obviously, the big news, which we talked about earlier as well, Bryce Underwood flipping to Michigan kind of reopened the door for Meadows. Kind of completely is like, hey, this guy's, really something to watch here. And, kind of brought up consolation prize and bringing him after Caleb Cunningham. Keelan Russell's not a bad alternative as opposed to Bryce Underwood. So I know that was a serious pushing point and, big point for him, and a big thing that our Blair Angulo does a great job of for us. And he was talking about how he really wanted to play in the SEC, which I think is a big factor as well. You got that mindset. So that one's a really big flip. And like you said, we were kind of hinting at it the whole way. It kind of felt like Alabama was in a really good spot. It was just a matter of when he was going to do it. And, Alabama gets him in the fold, and Jamarcus Shepard, kind of gets his big first fish, if you will. You got Lotier Brooks in the fold, which everybody knows about, but this guy's, literally big and, big splash and beats out very big programs for him in the end.
6'5", 200 pounds. I don't know that we can say that enough. There's a really good frame here. He's going to have a year to develop, maybe put a little bit of muscle on. He could fill that. I know everybody really was intrigued by, and I was too. I think we all were. Caleb Odom, right? 6'5", almost 230. I know he came in originally as a tight end, switched to receiver. Now he's in the portal. Now you have another big body there. Another top 50 recruit coming in to potentially be that big body if he's able to earn some snaps next season. We'll see, right? Jalen Hale's going to be healthy. Ryan Williams, potentially Jeremy Bernard, all going to be back. So pretty top heavy when you look at that position room. So we'll see where Meadows fits in, what he can maybe do in the spring. Yeah, no, I thought this was impressive. A handful of dominoes kind of fell to open the door for the opportunity here. Like you alluded to, Caleb Cunningham flipping to Ole Miss, Bryce Underwood leaving LSU for Michigan. Hey kid, why don't you come play with the number 2 overall player in the class, right? It's pretty enticing selling point. He was the one flip that Alabama landed. There were a handful of other flip candidates that you made sure to point out on the last show. You have talked about constantly on the board during the early signing period. Let's see if I have all these names right. Anquan Fegans, who ultimately stayed with Auburn, Donovan Starr, who also ultimately stayed with Auburn, and then Mason Dunn, 3-star cornerback, ultimately stayed with Ole Miss. Those were 3 flip candidates that Alabama kind of had their hands in, maybe needed some other things to happen to ultimately get those guys, didn't end up getting any of those guys. What can you tell us, Brett, about maybe the process there? And were there any other flip candidates that Alabama was in on but didn't get?
Yeah, those 3 are kind of the main guys I was tracking ahead, including Meadows. Kind of wrote on the board. Meadows and Starr were kind of top of the board of who on my own board of who I was tracking the most. Anquan Fagans, kind of more of a long shot. Yeah, he came and visited, took an official visit, then came back for the Iron Bowl. And kind of, again, anytime you take a trip that's late in the process, it's someone I'm going to be following. But he ultimately decided to stay with Auburn. I talked about it on the primer show. His older brother went to Alabama, was recruited by Charles Kelly. He's over at Auburn, so that relationship's been going on for however many years. So that was going to be tough to beat. Mason Dunn, kind of, again, that wasn't really doing any interviews, so it's kind of hard to read, but communication was still there. But he ended up staying at Ole Miss. And then, you look at Donovan Starr, was kind of a guy who looked to be making a decision from Wednesday to Friday. Then he moves it back up to Wednesday. And I talked about it. It was kind of maybe contingent on what was going to happen with Neem Offord, number 1 player in Alabama, that, Auburn felt like they were in a very good position to get. Ohio State felt like they were, going to hold on to his commitment, which was over a year long. Oregon was kind of mentioned. He ultimately flips to Oregon, and that kind of maybe, set it in stone. Hey, Starr moves his signing ceremony up in his decision. He signs on Wednesday for Auburn. So, again, like you said, none of those guys kind of ultimately flip, but you get a good add in Derek Meadows and that trio of Ivan Taylor, Dijon Lee, Chuck McDonald, assuming you hold on to Xavier Brown, Zay Mincy, Jalen Mbakwe. It's a very, very talented group. Red Morgan, it's a very good group, and guys that are kind of going to all be battling it out. And, again, it's all on the board, but there's going to be some turnover in there. Damani Jackson, I know you talked about that as well. So, Xavier Brown looks like he's kind of solidified himself on one side, and, maybe there's a competition over on the other side.
This was the early signing period. There's still, I believe, is it another signing period? How exactly are we describing this? Because I know that there's another point on the calendar, right? In February, late January, early February, where people that didn't sign during the early period can officially sign, I suppose. What are we calling the later signing period? Is there anything official for it?
I think that might be my headline for it, for what you just said. I'll just say that and then throw tracker at the end of it. But that's basically it's just kind of a February couple days general thing. It's like we saw, but kind of 99% of guys making their decisions in December. But, again, what we talked about, it's going to be something to monitor with no national letter of intent. There's, still going to be some some behind the scenes money conversations going on. So some of these guys that may be thinking they're going somewhere, stuff can always change. You never know. And, it's going to be kind of wild to track. But again, getting these guys in early and getting them to be early enrollees there's just a lot of positives to that.
Well, the reason I bring up I guess we're calling it the later signing period. Well, what are the chances that Alabama can add any more to this signing class during that period? Or are there other guys that they're tracking? I know Ty Haywood is still out there. It doesn't seem like he's going to end up with Alabama, but what are the chances Alabama adds any more during that later period or between now and then?
Yeah, I think the short answer is I'm not really tracking anybody. Ty Haywood, I still kind of firmly don't believe he ends up in this class. Again, there's still time, but it doesn't really seem like he's going to be part of this group. I know Alabama's happy with their incoming class. And I think, maybe there's I could give you a better answer in a couple weeks. You see what they do in this transfer portal. And again, they're going to be active. Alex Scarborough's put up a great piece, just kind of main positions that are going to be looking out for. Cody and them, they put a great podcast out, kind of hitting on that as well. So it's going to kind of see how Alabama's going to look in the portal. And, talking with kind of some guys out west when Kalen DeBoer first came over, it was, when we were talking about his recruiting ability, he was more of a portal menace, if you will, out in Washington. It was a lot easier for him to get great talent through the portal as opposed to the high school ranks. The NIL just wasn't there. The boosters were, it was, hey, we're going to pay you based on your performance out there. So and that's not what's going on at Alabama, but he's got that experience in the transfer portal. And, there's going to be some positions that are, arguably you can come in right away and start if the staff thinks you can. So it's going to be interesting to follow. And there may be a little bit more clearer picture as far as the February period goes in a couple weeks.
The transfer portal opened today, Monday. Again, we're recording this on Monday. Show comes out Tuesday. It's going to stay open until, I believe, December 28th. So a few days after Christmas. I think it's just a 3-week window. So yeah, we're going to be tracking the Alabama names that obviously jump in, other names that Alabama is probably going to reach out to. It's going to be kind of a busy and hectic 3 weeks coming in. But with regards to the actual, high school kids, I was just skimming the top 247 for the 2025 class. I think there's maybe 4 or 5 guys that haven't committed yet. So really not a lot available in terms of elite blue chip guys on the recruiting trail. So probably more portal moves that we're going to have to pay attention to over the next month or so to see who's going to be here for the spring in Alabama.
Real quick with the transfer portal as well. Yeah, you've got that window, but as Alabama fans are pretty familiar, that window can be changed any way. You can have a head coaching change that immediately puts out a 30-day window. And these playoff teams, which are going to be playing in a couple weeks from now, have 5 days after their last game. You've got to think Alabama, the program they're going to be involved and kind of going to be looking at some of those rosters as well. So I know there's going to be some departures, but Alabama fans, this staff's going to be active in the portal, and it may take, maybe a couple weeks for these guys to, officially go in, the Georgias of the world, the Texas, the Tennessee, all those types of rosters. So that's just kind of one thing I wanted to point out as well.
It's a good point. The portal, this initial window open until December 28th, but then as the playoff teams slowly get picked off, that's a good point. They'll have 5 days, I believe, after their final postseason or playoff game to officially enter the portal. And honestly, if you're Alabama, those are probably the teams you're looking at, right? Those are some of the rosters, the Tennessees, the Georgias, the Oregons, the Ohio States, the Penn States, the playoff teams, right? Because that's Alabama was right there in the mix, first team left out of the playoff. Those are probably the rosters they're going to want to mine if they're going to want to bolster what they'll have coming into the spring. So excellent point. Appreciate you bringing that up. I wanted to pivot now to officially tie a bow on Alabama's 2025 recruiting class. Brett, I wanted to hit you with some superlatives. Some of them you probably already have answers for because a few of them I stole from you, but others I'm going to hit you on the spot a little bit, just kind of see what you think about Alabama's 2025 signing class. I'm going to throw out some superlatives, and I'm curious just kind of what you come back with and why. And I'll start with this one. Who do you think of Alabama's 2025 signing class is the best overall athlete?
That one's tough because I keep talking about how this staff seems to go after guys that are multi-sport, multi-versatile. I'm going to show big man love. I think he was in my superlative as well. I'm going to go Jackson Lloyd, 6'7", 290 pounds, averaged nearly a triple-double in basketball for Carmel High School, does what he does on the football field, and also pitches and plays first base and baseball. That size, anyone that can move like that and play that many positions, number one, is a freak athlete, and number two, should excite Alabama fans to get him in the fold to have a real full Alabama football offseason.
Jackson Lloyd, offensive tackle from Carmel, California. Baseball player. I'm assuming that's a spring sport in California. Basketball obviously also goes through the winter months. Is he early enrolling, or is he going to commit to playing those sports through his senior year?
Oh yeah, he told me it was a tough decision, but he can't talk about enough how excited he is to get into that fourth quarter program and get into his real full offseason. Talk to his parents, talk to his coach, a couple other people out there. It's like this kid should be in the weight room in the off and in a normal football season, but he's running up and down the court on a basketball and dunking and windmilling and things like that. So he's eager to get to Tuscaloosa.
Always nice when you have a pretty good athlete playing offensive tackle for you. Next one. Through the recruiting process, you got to talk to a lot of these kids. Who's the best interview? Who's the best quote?
It's kind of low hanging fruit, I guess. It's got to be Keelan Russell. I think we joked about it maybe off camera or even before. It's like he said, "Who do you model your game after?" And he says, "I model after Keelan Russell." It's kind of like that humble cockiness. It's that fine line, and it kind of speaks to what you need again as a leader, like where he is at Duncanville at that top program to be playing, have a chance to be playing for a third straight state championship. You need to have that leader in your locker room. I think he's kind of just very funny, very straight up, and it's, hey, can I use that? Oh yeah, absolutely, like type thing. It's he's very funny kid, but he knows what he's saying as well. He kind of has that fine line as well. And then I kind of want to give a shout out to Marshall Pritchett and Luke Metz as well. Those are guys that you can kind of just call up any time of the night, and they'll give you a thought or whatever you kind of need. So at any time those guys were pick up the photo is awesome.
I like that. I want to be the first Keelan Russell. And I don't think people understand. Like, there's some people that would probably hear that and be like, oh my gosh, like, they would freak out. But also, like, we all know if you work in this space and you deal with these athletes, whether they're high level recruits or Division I guys that are playing and contributing, and even those that may be more like role players, so to speak, you got to be wired a different way if you want to like truly make it and hack it and compete at a level like this. And so, like, when I hear that, because we work in this space, I get excited because it's like, yeah, like this kid gets it. He's wired a little differently. Yeah, he may come up and get humbled initially because that always happens at the D1 level, but hey, like he's ready to come attack this, as opposed to like, you'd prefer that as opposed to somebody who might be a little bit more hesitant or nervous or something like that.
Yeah. And real quick, I think, and again, we've talked about this as well, but what comes with being potentially that guy at Alabama and being that quarterback. I mean, you look at Jalen Milroe, what he did he was at Good Morning America in the offseason. He was doing this, he was doing that. He's doing this commercial. He's with Roback. There's a lot that comes with off of it. And from what I can tell, what I've learned and talking with him, he's the whole package off the field as well.
Who in Alabama's 2025 signing class do you feel is the most underrated?
I'm going to go with London Simmons, 6'3", 295-pounder defensive lineman out of Mississippi. Kind of talked about him earlier in this show, but he's a guy who lost nearly 50 pounds in the offseason. He talked about how important that was for him. He kind of transformed his body. Freddie Roach was always monitoring him, and he transformed his body in the offseason. He came to a camp. I think it was the first camp in May 30th, the high school. Got offered, I think, a week before that, came back, committed, all the way locked in, had an outstanding season. I've had to pull up the exact stats, but it was over, 100, something around 100 tackles, double-digit sacks, double-digit tackles for loss. He's a guy that was playing in the middle, outside, a lot of versatility. I think, you talk to some analysts out there around the country, Cooper Patagna, Tom Loy, those are guys that are very excited about him as well. I don't know if he's a guy who can come in and contribute immediately, but that defensive line position, you need as many bodies as you can. And I really like London Simmons and what he can bring to the kind of that room as a whole.
6'3", 295, and he lost 50 pounds. Man, that's impressive. You talk about like discipline and whatnot that's required to compete at this level. It seems like this guy's got it.
Oh yeah, and Alabama was his first Power 4 offer. I mean, they looked at him. He's like, yeah, this kid. That was a big part of it as well. And he talked about that. It was like I was told for 3 years I have what it takes. You need to lock in, and he did so. So there's a lot to be excited about with him.
Who do you think plays first?
Like, does that mean special team snap or their position? Their position.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go Dijon Lee. We talked about it a little bit at the beginning. I think Xavier Brown has that one spot kind of locked up. That other quarterback spot, as we're recording this again Monday, Jaleel Hurley's in the transfer portal. Damani Jackson, all but likely to the NFL. I think that's kind of one of the few big decisions looming as far as NFL goes, that we're kind of still in the unknown about. I think Cody and Alex and Mike may have a little more insight to that, but I think maybe that other cornerback spot's going to be maybe up for grabs, so to speak. Jalen Mbakwe has played some time there as well, has played well at sometimes, looked as a freshman as he should sometimes as well. But everything you talk about with Dijon Lee, 6'4", 190 pounds, can play out in coverage, can keep up with your top end receiver, can deliver the boom, I guess, at the line of scrimmage. It's just kind of the whole package, and he's kind of turned heads this entire season. He shot up the rankings to that 5-star status, and I think he could potentially be another one of those kind of cornerbacks in this cycle to kind of follow Xavier Brown, Jalen Mbakwe, Zay Mency.
And it wouldn't shock me at all, just based on what we think that position is going to look like in the spring, him and Mbakwe, and maybe you throw Brown in the mix as well, just where they kind of cycle through, and maybe you play all three of those guys, just vary up their snaps a little bit. I know that was a weird, confusing thing about the season, is that Kane Womack's defense, they played a lot of dudes, and while I understand it was a little strange, right? Because usually you have your starters out there, you bring your backups, you bring in your sub packages every now and again, you just roll with it. But Womack has shown that he is willing to play a lot of different guys to help them get that experience. So whether or not Dijon Lee overtakes Mbakwe or Brown, or if Jackson comes back for that, CB2 spot or CB1 spot even, or just, to fight for the snap share, I suppose, it wouldn't surprise me at all to see him play quite a bit, just if for no other reason than that's Womack's tendencies. And also, when you're a 5-star guy, you don't normally go to a program, even one as good as Alabama, to sit the bench, right? Like he's probably going to get plenty of opportunity through the spring and fall, I think, to earn some playing time. I mean, he seems like he's that good too.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it didn't really seem like there was any rhyme or reason to those substitutions, because it was
weird, man.
Like
weird.
It didn't matter the score, the situation, the time of the field. It just didn't really. So it's kind of maybe a crutch for maybe some of my projections that the defense. Who knows?
So if we think Dijon Lee's going to play first, who do we think from the 2025 signing class is going to play the most during the 2025 season?
This one's tough because we've seen how tough offensive line is, but I can't go without mentioning Michael Carroll. 6'6", 315. We've talked about him a bunch on this podcast. You and I have talked about it. I think you mentioned him a couple times as early contributor as well. Road runner, kind of pitchfork in the middle, or forklift in the middle, has been described to me. He talked about how he was, he's seen the path from J.C. Langton, Tyler Booker, Evan Neal. He said, Michael Carroll, I'm up next. Kind of just has that whole package. And I think he's a guy that could potentially come in and replace Booker right away. Booker obviously hasn't made an official announcement, but you got to think he's taking the next step.
That makes a lot of sense. They're going to have a spot at left guard available. They have some experience coming back. I'm presuming that Jaden Roberts and Gino Vandemark are both returning for next season. I know Roberts' name is kind of floated on some draft boards, some big boards, some prospect lists. So we'll see ultimately what he decides. I would like to think he can maybe come back to see if he can stay healthy for another full year, but we'll see. There's going to be some opportunity, I think, for Carroll. It's also one of those things where it's another blue chip guy. And they kind of did something similar with Tyler Booker. When he first came in, it was him and Javion Cohen, if I remember correctly, kind of split the snap share all the way through the season. And then it wasn't until a sophomore year that Booker officially took over as the starter. I could see them doing something similar with Carroll, because, you've got Gino there, Gino Vandemark. We're assuming Roberts is back healthy at right guard. You can have Vandemark there at left guard. You can kind of sub him and Carroll out back and forth a little bit, let them split snaps until one of them takes control of it. Or, if you find that Carroll needs to develop more, you've got Gino there. If you feel like Carroll's ready, Gino's there as a good swing guard. So I think there's going to be opportunity. I do like that pick as the guy who from this class who will probably play the most, just because positional need, it makes a lot of sense. Yep. And talk to some of the experts about this guy. Seems like he's ready to go. Also, based on his interviews, sounds like he's ready to go. So, hey, I think that pick makes a lot of sense. Almost done here. I got a few more on this list. Which prospect do you think has the biggest upside?
Biggest upside. I think I'm going to go with, and you can tell me if I can't do this, but I'm going to go with the two receivers coming in. I think, and for different reasons. I think Derek Meadows, which we've hit on a bunch, 6'5", 200 pounds. I don't know if you mentioned if we mentioned that. We've seen his upside. We talked about his upside, but I think I want to talk about Lotier Brooks. He's a guy that people kind of, oh, he's a 3-star. He played in New Jersey. He just runs past guys, and all those things are true, but the production can't be ignored. His record-breaking, receiving touchdown, his yards, everything that he's done, and the excitement that you kind of hear in Tuscaloosa about him. I think he's a guy that can potentially make some waves in the special team return game almost immediately. Maybe it takes him a little bit longer to maybe understand the offense, maybe get a better route treat going on. But I think he's a guy that potentially can, or is too electric to keep off the field for too long. It's just a matter of, acclimating to that big time football. And again, there's no ignoring that New Jersey high school football isn't the same as Duncanville and Carrollton and Buford and all these other, and Mater Dei and Mission Viejo, all these other schools. But there's a reason Alabama wanted him, and Nick Saban wanted him really for a very long time as well. So if you take nothing else away from him, Nick Saban really wanted him. So I that's really all I can say about him.
Yeah, if Nick Saban wants you, you're probably doing something right. I think there's also something to be said for the consistency that this guy has shown from literally day one. Just like you go to his profile in freshman year, 971 receiving yards, 15 touchdowns. Sophomore year, 69 catches, 1,000 yards, 14 touchdowns. Junior year, 61 catches, 1,300 yards, 22 touchdowns, right? Like just year after year after year, being able to do that, being able to be kind of the guy immediately. And yeah, New Jersey's not Texas, it's not Alabama, it's not Florida in terms of overall collective talent, but to be able to come in immediately and make that kind of impact, and then to be able to sustain that over the course of your entire high school career, I think that says a lot. It's only a 3-star guy by the top 247 rankings. He's 57th overall in his position group, not even a top 10 guy overall in terms of New Jersey high school prospects. But this was a guy that committed pretty early to this staff. He didn't take another visit. Like, he committed in April, and he was just like, yep, this is where I'm going. This is the staff I want to play for. Jamarcus Shepard is the coach I want to play for. I want to come do the thing in Tuscaloosa. And he's clearly excited about coming down here. And this was somebody that the staff identified early and said, look, we don't care if anybody else can identify the talent that you have. We see what you have, and we're ready to bring you down here.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's got a big week, and about a month from now, he'll be in San Antonio for the All-American Bowl. So that'll be, I talked to a lot of 247 experts. They're pretty excited about seeing him against this top talent, and I'll be out there. So it'll be exciting to see kind of him match up against these guys and, other top talent. Chuck McDonald will be out there. Caleb Edwards will be out there, a couple other guys. So it'll be a fun event. It'll be certainly fun to see Brooks out there.
Who was kind of the biggest surprise signee for you in this class?
Ooh, that's a great question. You would think I would know all of them top to bottom by now. I could just list them off. I guess I'll go Ivan Taylor. I think just when you kind of factor in everything, just from that safety position was, I wrote a couple times, a real concern until he flipped, and it was almost worth the wait. The type of talent you're getting with him. I think you talked about him and your early contributors as well. I don't mean to give up too much away, but he kind of raved about him as well. From what I hear, you rave about him. Everything everybody says, he's kind of that whole package. He's a guy who visited in the summer, and hey, he loved it, but didn't really seem like Alabama, the communication was still there with Colin Hitchler and himself and the parents, but didn't really seem like Alabama and him were going to maybe even get him back on campus. And all of a sudden they do. And then kind of things progress very quickly. And ultimately he makes the decision to flip. So I thought that was a little surprising. I think, in the final days, weeks, it wasn't as surprising, but kind of getting his name back in the fold, at least to me personally, was like, hey, okay, this has got to kind of follow, and would be big to have. And, maybe it took a little bit longer than most fans would have liked, but it's a really, really good player in the back. And we've talked about it. And at that safety position, you've got some guys coming back, presumably, but you could argue that he has potential to make a real impact as well. And again, with Kane Womack's defense and DeBoer overall, this freshman, this whole class could play by week 3. We have no idea.
Potentially, yeah, but especially like just the different type of positions that are available in the secondary, and as versatile as this guy seems, it makes a lot of sense that he could potentially play early. But no, I like him as the surprise signee. He had a pretty long commitment, I believe, to Michigan, if I remember correctly, and to pry him away, I think that's pretty impressive to, especially just Michigan as another blue chip program, right? I believe they're still top 10 in this 2025 signing class, just in terms of class ranking. So to be able to pry him away from a program that really prides itself on defense, even in a down year like this year, their defense is still playing at a pretty high level. Pretty impressive pickup, I thought, for, not just Alabama, but also speaks to Colin Hitchler's recruiting chops as well.
Yeah, and real quick, one more thing on him. Just, you talked with Andrew Ivins about it. It's geographically, it's a huge win as well. You look at this class, it's not a lot of Florida. You got Michael Carroll, but he's from Pennsylvania originally. He's from, he's at IMG. He's not one of those maybe South Florida, Central Florida kids. Ivan Taylor, you're kind of tapping into that new area for the first time for Kalen DeBoer. I mean, he's probably not had to go over into Florida in a long time. So this staff, or really ever, so this staff to get in there and get a good win at a skilled position and a good, top 50 talent is very big for the future, I think, as well.
I like that. I like that a lot. Got two more for you. What positional need do you think was filled the best with the 2025 class?
I'm going to go quarterback. I think quarterback.
Let's just go to the guy at the top of the list.
Well, I mean, I guess you could go offensive line just by pure numbers and the need that they had there. So, yeah, we'll go offensive line. We talked about Jackson Lloyd. He's my most athletic. Michael Carroll, we've talked about. You got two in-state guys, Mal Waldrop, Micah DeBose, two guys that absolutely love Alabama. Maybe not guys that can come in and step in right away that you look at Carroll and potentially even Lloyd, but down the road that can be in that, center guard position. So getting that group in, and for Coach Kapilovich, or however you are supposed to Kapilovich, excuse me, for him to come in late. I mean, he was one of the last hires to put that group together and hold on for, a lot of big hitters going for Lloyd. USC came in till the very end. Michael Carroll, obviously, we saw Miami and Colorado come into the end. So the guys, get those guys in the building is very big. But again, Keelan Russell. I mean, Jalen Milroe, we'll see what happens with him. I think probably gone. So you got Ty Simpson, you got Dylan Lonergan, you got Austin Mack, but everything you hear about Keelan Russell, again, this kid could potentially, push Ty Simpson even for, some snaps early on.
Yeah. I mean, when you're the number one or number two overall recruit in the country, the expectation is not to come in and sit for a year and develop. The expectation is to come in and compete right away, and to perhaps develop on the fly a little bit. So I like both of those. Offensive line was honestly the thought that I had in my mind, because not just because of the sheer numbers that they're bringing in, but the talent of the guys that they're bringing in as well. I feel like there's a lot of guys in that offensive line signing class that could ultimately become starters in the not so distant future. It might be a little hard to break in next year, just depending on who they ultimately bring back, Alabama, and what they're able to maybe go get in the portal. But, perhaps couple years from now, could see a lot of guys from this 2025 signing class starting and playing on that offensive line. Last question I had for you. I'm going to purposely leave this open-ended so that you can take it kind of wherever you want. But when you look at this 2025 signing class, give me one bold prediction.
I feel like I'm taking the low-hanging fruit here, but Keelan Russell's going to be in New York by the end of his college career.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, he's called it. He's said it multiple times. He said it on the 247 live show. He's like, I mean it. I think he will be. I don't know if it's going to be 2025, 26, 27, whatever it may be. I think he's going to be in New York at one point or the other for Alabama, and potentially, can win a Heisman Trophy. That's my pick. I don't know how much more time we have, but I would love to know if you have one bold prediction.
I think bold prediction, Keelan Russell ending up in New York for the Heisman ceremony before his career is over I like that. I like that as a bold pick. I think another bold prediction, and maybe this is going out on a limb, but it's a bold prediction, so that's what it's supposed to be. I think Justin Hill is a guy that could potentially come in and contribute, not early, But I think as the season goes along, he's a guy that might be able to work his way into that pass rush rotation. It's a position of need. I know it's one in the portal that we all think they should probably go after, but that they're bringing back, they're losing Jahad Campbell, who not exclusively a pass rusher, but probably their most effective pass rusher when they decided to cut him loose and let him go. LT Overton has an NFL draft decision to make. You're bringing back Quay Rusaw, he was tremendous as the season went along. Yanze Pierre got some pretty key snaps later in the season, and he flashed a little bit, was able to make some plays here and there. It would not surprise me at all if Justin Hill worked his way into that rotation as the season went along. I don't know that he's a guy that we're going to see early, but just like in terms of truly working his way into that pass rush rotation and earning snaps, he's a guy that I could see probably do it later as the 2025 season unfolds. I don't know. Maybe that's
I love that one.
Yeah.
I love that one. I'm honestly kind of upset myself. We went almost 45 minutes without even mentioning Justin Hill, but I love that. That's a great pick. I think also one who can kind of quickly become a crowd favorite is AK Deer, just with the way he kind of has those punishing runs and, stares over defenders when he, kind of makes a big play. I think he could potentially maybe get some big crowd pops and some, kind of some cheers, early on potentially.
Yeah. Well, and running back's another room that we're going to have to pay attention to when it comes to the portal, when it comes to potentially NFL draft decisions, when it comes to Jam Miller. So what does that mean for AKD, or where's he at in the pecking order? That's a position group that we're going to be paying close attention to in the spring as well. I do like the AKD addition. Crazy. We went, 40 some minutes before we really mentioned AKD at all. So kind of speaks to the overall depth of this signing class, which, that's to be expected when it's the second ranked signing class in the country this cycle. Brett, that is all I've got for you today, man. I appreciate you coming on and taking some time to tie a bow on Alabama's second ranked 2025 recruiting class. Alex and Mike and I will be back later this week. We're going to discuss some portal stuff, some more playoff fallout. In the meantime, though, be sure to rate and review this show wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, and our Bama 247 YouTube page. Subscribe to Bama 247 and 24/7 Sports. I say it every time Brett is on here, but everything he writes is behind the paywall. So if you want more of Brett's insight on Alabama recruiting, you literally need a 247 Sports subscription. So take advantage of that. I put a link to it in the show notes. As always, we appreciate you guys for listening. We'll talk to you all again soon.
See you guys.